So what you're looking at are two speakers from Q Acoustics. To the left we have the 3030i, the latest entry into their lineup and the focus of today's video. And then to the right we have the smaller 3020i, which I reviewed a couple months ago. Now I admit that at first I wasn't terribly interested in reviewing the 3030 because, let's face it, a lot of reviewers have covered these speakers already, but enough of you have reached out to me asking about them to where I could justify bringing them in for an evaluation. So here's how this review is going to go down. I'm going to give the 3030i a proper review, but it is going to be short and succinct because I want to focus on what I think most of you want to know, which is how the big brother compares to the little brother, as well as how the 3030i stacks up to speakers that are just a little bit more expensive than it is. But first, I'm going to run down a few physical differences between these speakers, and then I'm going to talk about the performance. And if you're interested in things like detailed specifications, just click on the description box below and I'll have that information there for you. So about the differences between these speakers, well, as you can tell, there's a pretty big physical difference between them, but otherwise they're essentially the same product, except the 3030i is the larger version of its little brother. Both of them have the same soft dome tweeter that's practically an inch in diameter. The big difference is that the 3020i uses a 5-inch woofer, whereas the 3030i uses a 6.5-inch woofer. But when you combine that with the larger cabinet, this means a pretty big difference in terms of bass response. In fact, the 3030i is rated at going down to 46 Hertz, whereas the 3020i is rated at going down to 64 Hertz. Both cabinets use solid MDF construction with good bracing. My review samples came with the walnut vinyl wrap, which actually looks pretty good. And of course, there's going to be a price difference between the two as well, with the 3030i retailing for $399 a pair, whereas the little brothers retail for, let's just round up and call it $315 a pair. So let's take a quick look at the back, and then I'm going to talk about how they perform. So outside of the obvious physical differences, when you look at the back, both speakers look pretty much the same. Both are rear ported, both come with these thin binding posts, and both of them, when you take them out of the box, come with this tag that lets you know that these speakers are internally wired with QED cable. So with that out of the way, let's talk about how the 3030i performs. Okay, so for this section, I'm going to keep this review short and sweet. Instead of going over all the details I normally cover, I'm just going to give you a very general idea as to what to expect with the 3030i. So first, to those of you who watched and may even remember what I had to say about the 3020i, what you can expect out of the bigger speaker is the same exact sound, only you get more of it. More bass, better dynamics, a bigger sense of scale, the whole thing. That is the long and short of it in terms of the comparison. Now obviously I go into more details later on in this video, but that's all you really need to know if you're already familiar with the 3020i. Moving on, to those of you who are not familiar with the 3020i or Q Acoustics in general, what you can expect from this speaker is a presentation that's laid back, rich sounding, and it's going to be for somebody who says, hey look, I want to come home and I want to relax to my music. I don't want it to be too in my face, but I don't want it to be too boring either. I want just a little bit of sparkle on top. If that's what you're looking for, then there's a good chance you may really like these speakers. However, if you're looking for something that has that sharpness and the treble, like say from Focal or Monitor Audio or B&W, there's a good chance you're not going to like these because they don't have that sharpness in the top end. Nor do they project sound in a forward way like say Klipsch or the JBL Studios that do a good job of making it sound like there's a performance taking place right there in your room. Instead, when you listen to these speakers, the presentation is more or less limited to where the speakers physically are located in your room. And within that, what you're going to get is something that has good imaging, both on and off axis. You're going to get something that within the mid-range, you're going to get this nice, warm, and full-bodied presentation. One could even argue it's a little bit thick, particularly in the bass. It's not the quickest sounding speaker in the world, but it's not meant to be the quickest sounding speaker. It's just meant to give you this balanced yet warm and rich sound that's just fun to listen to. The treble is going to be interesting because the treble is going to be just a little bit. There's going to be just a little bit of sparkle there, but then there's going to be almost like a dip in the lower treble, right in the actual lower treble and upper mid-range. And this helps to give the sound a little bit of depth. And what this means is that you're still going to feel like you're getting good detail out of this speaker, but it's not going to beat you over the head with that information. And this gives you a little bit of wiggle room when it comes to listening to less than perfect recording. So this really is a speaker that's catered towards somebody that just wants to sit down, relax, but have just a little bit of flair, just a little bit of boogie to the sound, if that's a good way to put it. Anyways, that's pretty much going to be my take on the 3030i. The reason why I'm not going into more detail is just because this speaker's been covered to death, and I think this general summary should give you a pretty good expectation as to what to expect from a speaker like this. So now let's go over some tips that you can do in order to really get great performance out of these speakers. Man, I'm not sure what happened. I drank some water and now I pretty much lost my voice. Anyways, if you're interested in getting really good sound out of the 3030i's, then I would encourage you to investigate the following 3 solutions. The first is to put them on not only high quality stands, but tall stands. I'm talking about anywhere between 26 to 28 inches in height. And what you're trying to do here is you're trying to get the tweeter just slightly above your ears from a seated listening position, because I noticed when you do this, not only do you get really good integration between the tweeter and the woofer, but you also get the best vertical imaging. So just something to think about. Now, when it comes to toe-in, look, this is something that's room dependent, and it also depends on your taste. For me, in my room, I feel like these speakers sound best with fairly aggressive tone, with the drivers pointed towards the mid-shoulder area. In my space, this is where you get not only the best focus between both speakers, but it also gives me the balance of sound characteristics that I like the most. Now, the second thing that I would encourage you to do is, if you can, give this speaker at least a little bit of room to breathe, because it is a fairly large bookshelf speaker that can generate a fair amount of bass. So I would say a good 2 feet away from any wall boundary is where you want to be. Now, can you get away with placing it closer to a wall? Absolutely. You're just going to have to deal with excess bass energy. Now, of course, you can use the foam plug that comes with the speaker, but I noticed when you use that, it does strip away that rich character that I think makes it so fun to listen to begin with. And lastly, let's talk about equipment matching. So the good news is that these speakers are fairly easy to work with in terms of the type of gear that you can use, but they do like power. So for most people, I would say you want to pair them up to an amplifier that's capable of a good 40 to 50 watts per channel or more, especially in more of a traditional environment. Maybe if you're in a desktop environment, you can get away with a 30 watt per channel amp. But for most of you, 40 to 50 watts, all the way up to 100 to 150 is where you want to be. They like their power. Now, in terms of specific types of equipment that they respond best to, I personally feel like they respond best to gear that has more of an exciting sound to it, that classic V curve. And the reason I feel that way is because when you pair up this warm and rich sounding speaker with something that's a little bit exciting, especially within the treble, that's going to give you an interesting mix of strengths. So a good example of a great match would be the NAD 316B, the Marantz PM5005, or the PM6005. Even the PS Audio Sprout version 2 would be a very good match because it can control the speaker very well, but still have that somewhat exciting top end and a lot of clarity to it. A good match would be the Iotavx SA3 because it's such a balanced sounding integrated amplifier. And if you want more of a relaxed sound, then yeah, the Cambridge AXR 100 is also a good match with plenty of power. So there's a lot of different options there, but that's just been my experience so far. Anyways, with that said, let's just go over some of the caveats. So look, I don't really have a whole lot to go over here outside of the obvious. I mean, sure, not everyone's going to like the look, not everybody's going to like the sound. Yeah, they're a little bit power hungry, and yeah, the bass could be a little quicker, but I mean, for what you get for $400, I don't think there's a lot to complain here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap up my thoughts on this speaker, and then I'm going to get to the comparisons that I know a lot of you have been waiting on. Man, it's crazy. My voice is still just a little bit... Anyways, What's also crazy is that if the 330i was released just 10 years ago, it would have completely upended the entire affordable loudspeaker industry. Because back then there was nothing else for $400 that had that kind of build quality, that kind of performance, let alone from a well-established company with great global distribution. The fact that we're so spoiled now to where for $400 this is almost just becoming an expectation. I mean, that's insane. And the big question is, how did that happen? Because when you look at the architecture of different hi-fi components, not much has changed. Most loudspeakers, for example, still rely predominantly on cone and dome drivers. That's nothing new. Electronics still rely on the same old parts, and quite frankly, most of them are still based off of decades-old topologies. So how come gear is so good now? Well, when it comes to loudspeakers, I think the answer boils down to three reasons. The first being refinement in manufacturing, the second being improvements in driver tech, and the third being software. And a combination of this has allowed companies to bring forth these products to market at a price that was just unheard of even just 10 years ago. So here we are. I'm sitting here with a product that should be the recipient of the raviest of rave reviews. I mean, I should be celebrating this incredible achievement. And while it is a very good speaker for the money and definitely very easy to recommend for somebody who wants that rich and warm sound with just a little bit extra on top, the bottom line is, even if you pay just a little bit more money, you can get a better product. But I don't want the point to be lost on this speaker because at this price point, every little bit counts. For example, okay, so the difference between $400 speakers and the $600 speakers, you may be able to hear the difference, but that $200 gap is a big deal because that's money that you could put towards an amplifier or a source or something else that can give you even better performance. So I definitely think for $400, the 3030i is a very easy recommendation, particularly to people who know they want that kind of sound. Anyways, I know a lot of you are here for comparisons and I've been holding that from you, and that's because, as usual, I just save them for the very end of the video. So if you want to check that out, stick around, but if you've reached the finish line, then thanks for watching, and until next time, peace. So here you are. You've done the research and you feel like a Q Acoustics bookshelf speaker is going to be a great solution for your needs. Now the only step remaining is to figure out which one is going to best suit your personal taste and your own listening environment. So if you're in that position, hopefully this part of the review will help you to come up with a decision that you'll be happy with over the long haul. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by giving you my conclusion first. And in a nutshell, I feel like most people are going to prefer the sound of the 3030i over the smaller 3020i. And I say that for the following reasons. Number one, both speakers have the same exact sound signature, only you get more of that rich sound through the bigger 3030i. And when you put a larger woofer inside of a larger cabinet at this price range, you're going to notice a bunch of different dividends. Number one, you're clearly going to get more bass. The bass is going to be stronger, it's going to dig deeper, but on top of that, you're going to get a bigger sense of scale. The music is going to sound truer to life, and you're going to notice that the most through the mid-range. Then on top of that, you're going to have better dynamic output, and for those of you who like to listen at louder volumes, the bigger speaker will play louder. And I think for most people in most average size listening rooms, the 3030i makes a lot of sense, especially for only about 80 or so US dollars more than the smaller 3020i. However, with that being said, I do feel like there's a couple circumstances to where the 3020i can outperform its bigger brother. The first being in small rooms. I feel like the smaller speaker sounds a little bit more balanced than the larger one, which can honestly overwhelm a small room with a little bit too much bass. And then if you're somebody who needs to put your speaker against a wall or maybe on a literal shelf, even though these speakers come with foam plugs for the port, the 3020i just naturally performs better in that environment. And then lastly, if you're looking for a really good desktop solution to where the drivers of the speaker are only going to be maybe a couple feet from your ears, the 3020i is going to be superior in that regard. The driver integration is going to be better, it's going to sound a little more balanced, and it's not going to overwhelm that space with too much bass, which in turn just end up with this kind of muddy sounding presentation. So that's going to be my take on how these two speakers compare. So now let's move on. Actually, you know what? There's a couple more things that I want to touch on. A lot of people are really big about imaging, and as you can imagine, the smaller 3020i is slightly, and I mean ever so slightly, better at laying down a wider, more holographic soundstage. We're not talking about a world of difference here, but it is slightly better at that. Also, when it comes to overall speed, normally a smaller speaker is notably quicker than the bigger speaker. That's usually the trade-off. And I do think that's true here. But again, we're not talking about a huge difference in performance. Like, you'd really have to be listening pretty closely in order to hear the difference between them. But it is there, and it's definitely something that I want to note. So with that out of the way, now let's move on. Okay, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time with this comparison because, to be quite honest with you all, I'm a little burnt out on constantly referring to the ELAC DBR62 and the Triangle Bro 3. Still, I know there's enough people out there who would like to know how the Q Acoustics 3030i, a set of very well-reviewed $400 speakers, can compete against other products that are also well-reviewed but cost more money. As a reminder, the ELAC DBR62 retails for $600 a pair, which is a pretty big difference at this price point. And then we have the Triangle Bro 3s at $550 a pair. Now, I'm not going to go over specifications. We're just going to jump straight into the comparisons. So first, a quick comment about build quality. The ELAC DBR62 is going to be the most dense and inert speaker of the group, but the Q Acoustics 3030i, honestly, for the money, is pretty darn good and is almost as good as the ELAC, which is a compliment to Q Acoustics. Triangle has the thin-walled cabinet, so comparatively, even though it's the larger speaker of the group, it's actually one of the more lightweight when you consider its density. Now, when it comes to actual sound, well, let me put it to you guys like this. The ELAC DBR62 in the middle is going to be the most balanced of the group, which means treble, the mid-range, the bass is the best integrated. You're also going to get, I would say, the least fatiguing sound and probably the most consistent performance, meaning that it doesn't really matter what kind of gear you have or how you set up the ELACs, they're going to give you very consistent performance. Now, the problem with them is some people just feel like it's so even-keeled that it's a little bit boring to listen to. I do feel like the ELAC DBR62 scale up the best, meaning that if you connect them to truly high-end gear, they're going to give you pretty good performance, but most people aren't going to really do that. Then, of course, we have the Triangle Bro 3s over here. The Triangle Bro 3s between the three of the speakers are going to have the most lively sound, and that's because a lot of people think it's the treble, but it's actually the upper mid-range, just right at the crossover point between the two drivers. That's actually going to be boosted a bit, so this speaker is going to be just a little bit more lively. It's going to have the bigger sounding mid-range. It's going to be more forward, more dynamic. The bass is going to be stronger than the other two speakers, although not quite as well controlled as what you get with the ELAC. And the top end is going to be more expressive. It's going to be a little bit more lively, yet still easy to listen to. The Q Acoustics is going to be a speaker that in many respects has some of the DNA of the ELAC in the sense that both speakers have this kind of warmer, richer sound. So the ELACs are going to be, or the Q Acoustics are going to be a lot more similar to the ELACs in that regard. Now, they're not going to be as resolving. In other words, the ELAC's going to definitely be superior in that regard. The Q Acoustics isn't going to have the driver integration, and quite frankly, it's just not as good of a speaker as the ELAC DBR62. But again, at this price point, that's to be expected because $200 is a huge difference. I mean, that's literally half the cost of the 3030i. So I think the 3030i holds up very well, though, because it is just a little bit more lively. There's a little bit more character to the sound. And subjectively speaking, I wouldn't be surprised if people would prefer the Q Acoustics over the more expensive ELAC because the top end is just a little bit, by comparison, just a little bit more boosted, and there's just a little bit more coloration within the mid-range and the bass. And obviously the difference between the Triangle and the Q Acoustics is going to be pretty huge. It's one of those deals where you just have to listen to it to figure out which one you prefer. So anyways, that's going to be my breakdown. Hopefully that meant something to you guys. The only thing I need to mention is if you're running like low power amplifiers, the Triangle is going to be the easiest to drive among the three. The ELAC and the Q Acoustics speakers both like a decent amount of current behind them in order to really strut their stuff. Anyways, guys, that's it for the comparison. And yeah, thanks for watching. Peace.